Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Rolka. I want to welcome you to live event number 12. Um, the chat is open, so please feel free to chime in with your questions and/or comments. I must admit, I have a backlog of questions, so I'm going to do a bit of a speed round here and try and get a lot of them taken care of because some people have been waiting. So thank you for joining me tonight. I really do appreciate it. If you've chosen to subscribe, thank you. If not, please consider doing so. The chat's open. There is one more thing too. I have a little bit of a funny throat thing happening, so I'm probably not going to be doing a lot of demonstrations with the piano tonight. And I realized that I've been holding back on you. I've been holding back the magical elixir that I drink when I'm feeling sick. And so, very quickly, boil water. Get some ginger, skin it, chop it, steep it in the boiling water for about 10 minutes. Not boil it, but just, boil the water, then put the ginger in there, cover it with a lid, let it steep for about 10 minutes. Hello, Susan, welcome. Get the ginger out of there, pour yourself a cup of it, little squeeze of lemon, little bit of honey, or in this case it was brown sugar, and that's what I drink when I'm not feeling 100%. Welcome, all of you. Thank you for chiming in so quickly. Okay, speed round. This question goes back a couple weeks, actually. Hey, Jeff, thanks for the awesome warm-up. I have a question. When we go through the passaggio with this exercise, should we gradually get more falsetto-y and maintain consistent volume, or keep in full voice, inevitably get louder, and just stop when we're reaching? Okay, so do stop when you're reaching. Okay, that is not the intention of these high-range videos. In my teaching, I recommend making a smooth transition through the secondo passaggio. If you don't know how to do that, there's a bunch of videos on the channel for that. High Notes for Male Vocalists Part 1 is the start of that. I just released today, actually, Singing Through the Break or Smoothing Out the Break. That's another good one. Check into that and then approach your break in that way. Thank you, Susan. And kamlakar, lemon, honey, ginger, maybe. Exactly. Yeah, thank you both. Get back to the secondo passaggio, working to make a smooth transition through that area of your voice. That's the goal. Then we match resonances, and we got this beautiful full-range tone that we can sing sustainably with indefinitely. Was wondering, what exercises would you recommend for increasing range? Depends on who you are and what register you're trying to expand. Actually, I think I addressed that last week, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, similar to the previous question, High Notes for Male Vocalists Part 1 is a good place to start. Smoothing Out the Break, which was released today or Friday, depending on your time zone, was done in 5 different voice ranges, and that walks you through the entire process of getting through the secondo passaggio. So that would be a good place to start too. Okay. For some letters like A or O, it's easier to go low. Is that normal? Yes. And that is why the warm-ups, I know I call them warm-ups, they're really technical exercises, and that's why they're built the way that they are. I'm trying to take advantage of the natural qualities of the vowel sounds to get our voices into proper alignment. Certain vowels, the closed vowels, E, A to a certain degree, U, also tend to go lower more easily if we allow them to brighten. Now, if we allow our voices to brighten and narrow as we descend, we're going to be all right on almost any vowel. But those in particular are a good place for us to start. This is also why in many of the high-range training videos, you'll notice that even if it starts on an open vowel, it changes to a narrow vowel as you're descending, and that's to try to really make it easier to get a good transition into that thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice as you descend, chest voice, in other words. Playing with the pronunciation solfege and right notes solfege. I'm afraid I don't understand that question. Hello, possible you are playing with the pronunciation solfege and right notes solfege. I'm not sure what that question is, I'm afraid. I'm sorry about that. How to achieve phonation. Kamlakar, do you mean at the very beginning, like the tonal onset, or in the middle of your line? Can you tell me what you mean by that? Okay. That takes care of the really old school questions. Now, I'm better caught up here. That's for today. Okay, so now I have my leftovers from 11. This one's actually very easy to deal with. This is about the lip trill video that was released last week, and they asked if you could just use that as a general warm up. And the answer to that is yes, you certainly can. However, I think of the lip trill exercise as a really amazing tool, but not the end-all, be-all of vocal practice for us. And so because of that, I think it's really important that if you're warming up, you get some vowel practice in there too, some straight-up vowels, E, A, A, O, and U, in addition to the lip trill. That being said, every vocalist is different, and I think the lip trill is a great way to jumpstart your warm-up, so you can get pretty warmed up really quickly by using the lip trill. Bikeman, good day. Hello. Thank you. Can you explain more in detail the passaggio and secondo? Of course. I'm happy to. There are 3 main transition points that are called the passaggi. The primo passaggio, the secondo passaggio, and the third one. I don't exactly remember the name for that. The primo passaggio, most people sing straight through the primo passaggio without really even noticing it. In my teaching, I refer to that as the point at which your vocal technique starts to matter. Because if you have good vowel alignment and good airflow, you most likely won't even notice it. You'll sing right through it. Typically, this is where we are starting to do a little bit of widening of vowels as we're getting into the zona di passaggio. The zona di passaggio is the area between the primo passaggio and the secondo passaggio, and we can think of this as like if you've noticed a teeter-totter, which I don't know if it's called that in all around the world, but it's like a plank, and you've got like 2 people on either end of it, and there's a fulcrum in the middle, right? And it kind of, sort of gonna go bouncing back and forth. And when we're in that zona di passaggio, it's like everything slows down and we're kind of balancing our way through it. And the secondo passaggio is the exiting point of the zona di passaggio. And that is the point at which we are fully in cricothyroid dominant singing. So everything below the primo passaggio is thyroarytenoid dominant. That doesn't mean that the cricothyroid muscles aren't engaged. It's just that they're not the dominant controlling force on the vocal fold. This would be called your chest voice. When we're in the zona di passaggio, there's a transference of energy between those thyroarytenoid muscles and the cricothyroid muscles. The cricothyroid muscles are starting to elongate the vocal fold and exert more influence on how it behaves. When we're above the secondo passaggio, then we are cricothyroid dominant. Thyroarytenoid muscles are still there, they're still working, but the cricothyroids are really doing the lion's share, if you will, of the work there. And that is generally referred to as the head voice. If we make a good transition through the zona di passaggio, then we will carry our resonances over and we'll have a good, consistent tone. This is and I shudder to use this word, but this is the illusion that good vocalists will execute and convince listeners that there is no break. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not really doing a lot of demonstrations tonight because I'm just not feeling my best. But when we carry our resonances over, when we prepare for that transition and we execute it well, you won't notice it. And as you sing that way, over time, you will stop feeling it. You won't really take that much of a notice of it. It's still an area of your voice where your technique needs to be very precise, but it becomes much less of a big deal. The final transition point is much higher for like a male tenor. This is right by high C, usually just below it on B natural there. And this is the point at which the ligament on the outer surface area of the vocal fold takes on the predominant role of the vibratory surfaces. And that is what we would think of as our falsetto range. So when that ligament starts to vibrate, it's in a falsetto area. But the thing is that when you're in the appropriate range with good airflow, it will maintain consistent timbre the same way that we maintained it through the secondo passaggio much lower. I hope that answers your question. Please let me know if that's a good explanation. Okay, so I took care of that one about the vibrato or the lip trill video. Can everyone sing? This is a really cool question. I love this question. Can everyone sing? And how long do we have to do these exercises before we move up? I presume that means get better. How will I compare my voice, seeing as how I can't hear myself? I have to assume that they mean not listen critically in real time while doing the exercises, which I would recommend. And if I stuck to this regimen religiously, will I have a chance at singing? Okay, can everyone sing? I have never met someone who's tone deaf or had some type of physical malady that prevents them from using their voices. I assume that exists, but I have not personally had any experience with it. Everyone whom I've ever worked with, everyone with whom I've spoken to, even those who have been told that they cannot sing, may not have the facility. They haven't learned how to use their voice, but they are neither tone deaf, nor in any other way incapacitated. And so with time and practice, we've learned to sing. So I figure that there is a small percentage of people that are physically incapable in some way of singing, but I have not met them yet. And then all the rest of us fall into the rest of that percentage. So if that's 1% of people, which is, I'm just making that up. I don't know if it's really 1% or not, but just by having a number to throw at it, if 1% of people have some type of malady that prevents them from singing or discerning pitch in such a way that they can't differentiate the difference between notes, then the rest of us, the rest of the 99% of us, are somewhere else in our practice, working on our technique and getting better and better and better. So I think all of us can sing. I think that we can all improve our instruments with practice and with patience and with critical assessment. So yeah, critical assessment is what I would recommend for this person who's saying that how do they compare their voices? This is what I talk about frequently, about recording oneself, and I'm going to do a video about this in the coming weeks. It doesn't have to be high fidelity. It literally just grab your phone and put it 5 feet in front of you and play your guitar or sing along with your pre-recorded track. Try that out and evaluate it when you're not singing. Listen to it critically. Are there any vowels that stick out? Are there any vowels that you just can't hear in your performance? Those are the things to look for and to work on. Are your phrases really, really choppy? Are the beginnings of the phrases really rough, but when you get into it, it gets better and better? All of those things tell us something about how we're using our voice and can show us what to practice. So, in the case of the beginning of the phrase, look at your tonal onsets. If your phrases are really choppy, look at your airflow. Practice the lip trill. All of those things will help. Susan Taylor. Come on. Let me see here. Kamlakar middle phonation. Kamlakar, does that mean middle phonation as in the zona de passaggio? Is that what you're asking me about? I'm so sorry to have to ask for further clarification on this, but right. Okay, I see there. You've actually taken care of that down there a little bit lower. How to overcome the breakings and cracking while singing or talking? Excellent question. Cracking when you're singing or talking is not always a bad thing. It can mean that you're trying something new. So if you're practicing your vocalizations, you're working on something new, you get a little voice crack, that's letting you know that you're doing something different. That's a good thing. We want to do something different, right? Now, if you're always cracking in the exact same place, then you can take a closer look at that. For example, let's say you're always cracking in the zona de passaggio and your voice generally fatigues really, really easily, and you're doing these exercises at the piano, right? You're playing the exercises. Well, there's a couple of things that you can look at there. One, if you're sitting down at the piano, assess your posture. Assess how you're integrating your engagement with the usage of your voice. If it's always right in the zona de passaggio and your voice fatigues early, you're almost certainly carrying too much thyroarytenoid dominance into that range of your voice. Try backing off a little bit. And in so doing, focus on that engagement a bit more and see if the cracking stops or stops some of the time. Maybe it'll increase as you're kind of baiting your voice to make the transition into cricothyroid dominance. If that's the case, check out some descending exercises so you can practice that transition in a descending pattern and then get back into it. But cracking while singing or talking, it depends on where you are in your range, and it can really be dependent on a lot of different aspects of how you're using your voice. Capone, hello, I want to raise my voice a little bit with NG voice, if it helps. How to? Excellent question. For starters, I assume that by raise your voice, I'm assuming you mean raise it in range. If that's incorrect, please chime in. And if you're looking to use that particular exercise to expand your range, get very, very comfortable with it being very, very bright and very, very far forward in the so-called mask, if you will. One of the cautions with that is that it has to be really, really far forward, and yet we still have to maintain a connection to the vocal fold as well. So you may consider practicing that in two different ways. One, I guess I'm going to have to demonstrate this. I'll see how my voice responds. With the NG sound, you can make it really, really smooth. You can also make it very bright. Practice doing both. The rearward one is going to help you stay connected to the vocal fold. The forward one is going to help make you aware of the resonances that are required to make a smooth transition through the secondo passaggio. It's going to carry those resonances over. With that comes a certain amount of lightness on the vocal fold, which is advantageous for that transition. Practice between the two. You'll feel quite light on the vocal fold. That's a good thing. And then when you're ready, when you feel like you're comfortable with it, test yourself out by releasing to ah. So depending on how you place that resonance, you'll get a reasonably bright tone. If it's too far back, however, you'll get a much... That wasn't terribly unpleasant, I don't think, but a much softer, duller tone. And I think all of those are really, really useful to us. I mean, those are all colors that we can incorporate into our palette at the end of the day. Susan, so the lip trill is considered a pre-warm-up. By me, it is. When I'm working on the lip trill, I feel as if something has to come afterwards. That the benefits of that exercise that make it so good for us are sufficient to make it somewhat of a disconnect between it as an exercise and actual singing. In other words, it's a great jumpstart. However, I think that getting some vowels in there as well is much, much more closer to what we're going to encounter in our actual singing. And so I don't ever use the lip trill as the sole warm-up. Maybe in just a pinch, like if I don't have any time at all, like zero time at all, then I'll hit the lip trill really fast and start singing. But that's what we plan ahead for, so that almost never happens to me. Basically, better to plan ahead and use it as your pre-warm-up and be able to do some vowels as well. But in a pinch, yeah, better than nothing. Jeff, how to overcome the breakings and cracking? Okay, I covered that. Angie, Bikeman, Thank you, Jeff. That was an excellent explanation. You are very, very welcome. Thank you. I'm happy to serve. Gerald Ryan. Hello. Welcome. Welcome. It's all good, and no worries about being late. I'm glad that you're here, and welcome again. Certainly, you can. It's been a bit of a speed round up till now, so you can always circle back when we're done with the live event and check out the first little bits of it. YouTube records it and releases it. Bikeman, Jeff, I have tremendous hearing loss in some of the tonal frequencies like bass. It's hard for me to hear, but I can feel it. My only solution is to create the sound in my head and hope it comes out sounding correct. I was embarrassed by a accompanist because I could not hear the piano. Bad acoustics. He literally stopped playing. It's clever enough, though, to end the song a cappella. Man, that's horrible. I mean, there's so many aspects of that which are really just awful. I mean, for one, I'm really sorry that you're suffering this hearing loss. It's like a horrible thing. I hope that was this a natural thing or was it a traumatic experience? I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm sorrier still that your accompanist had the breach in decorum. I've never worked with an accompanist that I think would do that. And I'm sorry that happened to you. But by the same time, I applaud your courage and the fact that you persevered and sang the rest of it a cappella, and that is a huge testament to you. So, as much as I feel bad that all these horrible things happened, I'm really, really glad that you stuck with it and you finished it up. That's excellent, as it should be. Kamlakar, thank you for your explanation. You're very, very welcome. It's a pleasure. Breathy voice, sure. On my channel, there is a video, how to sing with less breath in your voice. If you do a quick search for that, you'll find it, and that would be a good place to start. I would also recommend the video on tonal onsets. I believe those are in the technique playlist, so that would be a place to have a look. And actually, I've realized I've knocked off the leftovers from last week, so I can ditch that sheet. Let's see here. Kamlakar, my voice is getting breather. I assume that means breathy, like you said before. Yeah, check the tonal onsets. Tonal onsets are often the culprit here. Okay, and that's I don't know if that particular phrase is used in all voice teaching, but I've just read about it so much. That's the point at which you begin singing. So, like when I start an exercise, that moment right there when I start singing is the tonal onset, and I think it's incredibly, incredibly important. If we get off to a good start of our phrase, so much goes so much easier for us. Bikeman, what would you recommend to help me? I've gone to specialists and the problem is still existent. Headphones help, but live performance can be disastrous. By headphones, I assume you mean in-ear monitors, and that would be the main thing to do. But with hearing loss already, that's going to exacerbate the problem. Earbuds, I mean, even though you can control, and I would control the tempo, the volume of those earbuds very, very strictly. Most of the receivers on those packs have their own volume control. You can also typically set limiters on them, which means they'll only go up to a certain dB level. And I mean, if you can wear in-ears, that's a step in the right direction. If you can wear ones that block all external noise, that's another step in the right direction. But you've really got to have a good monitor mixed in order to use those, because you have to have a mix engineer that's pumping enough information at the appropriate levels to your in-ears to get a good, to hear everything adequately. Um, so yeah, ones that block all sound, a good mix, and I would limit the volume very, very strictly. It would be worth asking your specialists what that should be, because they will know the level, the extent of the damage that's been done to your ears, and they can advise you better than that, because that's not something I can advise you on. See, let's take this here, and then I will get caught up with the screen. This is a very good question. Can you talk a little more about 360-degree breathing in relation to Appaji, that is, breathing all around the body, allowing the breath to expand down into the lower abdomen and flow and expand into the rib cage, and especially in the lower and upper back? I did a quick search on that, and 360 breathing seems to be a way of discussing what I would consider to be the old school thought or the old school teaching around breathing for singing, and I'm afraid it's rather inconsistent with the way that I teach Appaji. The whole notion of expanding further and further down into the lower abdomen, yes, we're going to feel muscle engagement all the way down to the pelvic floor. But the thought of expanding the lungs down that far and pooching out the stomach, which is usually included in 360 teaching, is inconsistent with Appaji. I'm afraid to say. I'm sorry to say, I should say. And in general, most of what I read on that methodology falls into what I would call the oversimplification of breathing technique for singing. Again, I'm sorry to say. Appaji is really difficult to observe, and I think that's why so much of the stick out your stomach and breathe into your back and breathe from the diaphragm, all these things start to occur because you can't observe Appaji. When you see someone who is singing with properly executed Appaji, it doesn't look like anything. They look like they're standing up straight, and there's not a ton of visible movement. It's in some of the exercises that we do to isolate muscle groups and practice with them that you'll see muscle movement. And one of these days, I've got to do a video with like a little bit tighter shirt so that it's easier to observe what's happening, and I can go through some of the different aspects of understanding Appaji, learning to use it, and then executing it in the context of exercises and songs. So, and this was a great question too. And the next question here is, can you talk about how to keep your airflow going smoothly when singing consonants and plosives? These tend to cut off or interrupt the flow of air while singing smooth vowels. Yeah, I have a great practice for this. It's a bit of a pain, so, be warned. But it will very quickly help you understand how to sing legato lines very smoothly. For starters, take your melody, whatever that is, and sing it on any vowel you like. I usually choose E or A for my clients, but you can really use whatever you like. It doesn't entirely matter. Try to notice where you're breathing. Try to notice how your tonal onsets are working. Just evaluate it with that E vowel. And then take a look at your lyrics and take all the consonants out and place those vowel sounds where they're supposed to be in the line, rhythmically accurate to the line. And practice that. See how it goes. Try to make it as legato as it was when you were only doing one single vowel. And then try it with 10% consonants. So that means you're going to put 10% of the value of your consonants in. And it's probably going to be really slurry, and it'll be mostly unintelligible, but that's fine. And then do 20%. And usually about 20% is a really, really good legato line for most popular genres, so pop tunes and folk and stuff like that. Around 20-25% of normal is a good place for most of us. But if it's not for you artistically, then try 30, try 40. See if you can keep that line smooth and legato. And if it starts to get too choppy, back it away. And do that, for a little while with different tunes and different songs. And after a while, it becomes this very, very easy habit to get into, and you'll start thinking of your phrases that way. And before you know it, That issue will be a thing of the past, and you'll only be spot checking it in the future. Okay, let me grab a few of these questions on screen here. Linus N., in your opinion, what operatic tenor has had the best singing technique? Do I have a role model? Man, that's an interesting question. Gosh. I love Dietrich Friedrich Dieskau, but I don't know if I can speak to his technique. I just love the way he sounds. Peter Pears is a lovely, lovely vocalist. I mean, I've got to say Pavarotti, don't I? I mean, he is incredibly noteworthy. And I love the stories about him being trained from such a young age. When you've been training since you were 5, technique ceases to be something that's technique, and it just becomes the way that you sing. Do I have a role model? Kind of, but I sort of pick and choose. I don't know if I would limit myself to just a single individual. And honestly, I don't sing a lot of classical music. I mostly sing pop music. So my role models, they're more role models for the way that they might write a song, the way that they might melodically and harmonically deal with a melodic line or an interesting turn of phrase and things like that. My role models for my practice, however, I love how concise Shirley Emmons' explanation on that webpage about Appaji is. It's easy to read and easy to understand, and I love referencing it because it's a way of bringing people into Appaji, which I am very, very much a fan of because it had such a dramatic impact for me. I love reading Richard Miller's books because they're so in-depth and so scientific. I love listening to Stevie Wonder because it's just so easy. It's so natural sounding to him, and it's so beautiful. I don't know. I kind of went off the rails there a little bit, but I hope that helps. Susan, thank you for the explanation of lip trills. You are very welcome, Susan. It's a pleasure. Jake, 3048. Any advice on tongue tension and how to relax it while singing so it doesn't hinder vocal performance? Closing off back of throat, getting caught up on vowel and consonant sounds, etc. Good question. Really, really good question. I did a video on that not too long ago. I'm afraid the title escapes me. I wanted to call it tongue abuse because in it I recommend grabbing the tongue and holding it out while you sing your vowels. And that can be a good way to become very aware of your tongue tension. So you might... And if you feel it really wanting to pull back, then you may have to hold it there for a little while, sing through some vocalizations for a week or two, and then, pardon me, and then try laying it on your lip. It's still going to sound a little bit funny, but what you're practicing is keeping it on your lip so it doesn't pull back reflexively. And that's the thing, when we've got that tongue tension, we have to learn to change our unconscious reflexes so that it stays put. When you can leave it on your lower lip effectively, then you can try just placing it behind your front bottom teeth and singing your vowels that way. And as long as you can keep the tip down and relatively at ease there in the well of the mouth, you're probably doing quite well. From there, you can try singing your vowels with the tip of your tongue pressed behind your front top teeth on the bony ridge of the hard palate. So like if you take your tongue and you start at your top front teeth and sort of sweep it along the top of your mouth, the roof of your mouth, you'll feel some ridges of bone. You can take the tip of your tongue and place it there. Again, sing through some vowels, spend a week or so doing it, Not like exclusive of all other vowels, by the way. Just, do that for 3 or 4 exercises and then come into a more normal position and try to notice if your tongue still wants to reflexively pull back or if it's lying a bit more at ease. That can really, really help with that a lot. Capone, what happens when voice box itching? Interesting. I wonder if you are experiencing something that I experienced for a little while. I wouldn't have called it itching though. It always felt like there was something on my throat and I couldn't quite clear it. Like there was something there, and I was like, I would do my swallowing and drink lots of fluids and things like that. And I had a bunch of people look at it. There was nothing there. There's certainly no nodes or anything like that. What I ultimately attributed it to was this sort of stage of development. This was many years ago for me. The stage of development where my technique was improving quite a lot, but I was still new to transitioning the secondo passaggio. And it was just sort of a little bit of a little bit of the musculature around the larynx and vocal folds was just getting a little bit sore is the wrong word. It just was feeling a little bit of the fatigue, but I was never getting hoarse, never having any vocal fold fatigue or anything like that. And so that's the important distinction there, is that there was no vocal fatigue. It was a little bit of side muscle fatigue. And eventually it stopped happening, and I've never noticed it since. So, but I don't know if that's exactly what you're talking about. Let me say so if that sounds familiar. If not, let me think about it a bit more. I'm going to grab this question here. This is a very interesting question. I have heard and personally experienced times when people have been moved to tears because of certain notes, voices, and harmonies. How can we use our voices / tone to influence people's emotions? Some people's voices seem to touch people emotionally while others don't. Can we do this at will? Well, I think there are two sides to this equation. There's the singer and there's the audience. And if you are singing love songs to the brokenhearted, you're probably going to stand a pretty good chance of getting a few tears to erupt. If you are, I did a tour of the Pacific Northwest one time, and I was playing at a Borders Books and Music when they still had Borders Books and Music, and I was playing my songs, which I've observed people have rather emotional responses to. And I finished a song, and this guy was sitting in a chair right next to me, and he looks up at me and he says, "What's it feel like to play a show in a library?" And I thought, right, okay, not the right venue. So I'm going to get to the practical aspects of this that we can do as vocalists in a second, but I think that it's worth considering the environment. All right. When I was in a Borders Books and Music and people are reading the paper and they're wanting to read, whatever book it is they've got, I'm not the main attraction, right? And that's cool. We understand that. You can still reach people, but it's much more random than if you're playing a house concert, and you have done your programming accurately to the audience that's in attendance. Now, practically speaking, however, we will stand a better chance of connecting with our audiences, I think, if we incorporate a reasonable amount of brilliance and versatility into our voices. So we don't want to do the same thing over and over and over again. That's why earlier in that NG example, using a bit of contrast from time to time in our performance is going to keep our listeners engaged and helps us to connect with them. If they stay engaged, then we're going to make a better connection. If we make a better connection, they are more likely to empathize with the material that we're singing. There was another thought that I had about that. That's a big one, though. I think that having the flexibility in our voices and having the availability of that brilliance is much more touching. But I just don't know that how much we can separate the environment that we're singing in versus how we use our instrument. Having that brilliance, though, means all of those things that we talk about in the warm-ups and in all the technical videos on the channel, right? Good airflow, good engagement. All of those things also, this was the other thought that I had about this question, was that if we are struggling, our audience will sense this. They will see it in our faces, they will see it in our body language, and that will not help them to be at ease during our performance. We want them to be at ease. Part of our job as performers and entertainers, I think, is to make it look effortless most of the time. I think there are times to make it look a little bit like it's challenging. That can engage with our audience too. But in general, it's always a push and a pull with the people that we're playing for, that we're entertaining or singing for. We want to engage with them. That's why we're there. We're singing songs. We're using our voices in professional ways, and we've worked and we're aligning the vowels so it's easy to understand the words. I once asked this question of a very, very famous voice instructor in the San Francisco Bay Area who will remain nameless. And I said to the person, I'm not really connecting with my audience. Like, what can I do? And he looked at me and he said, well, I'd say you have to amp up your rhythm. He listened to me sing a few things and then said, you've got to be rhythmically more on it. You know, you don't know what the guy on stage is thinking. He could be thinking about, he for all the world, he can look like he's entirely devoted to the song. But he could be thinking about wanting to get a sandwich right after the gig because he's hungry. Yeah, true. That's true. I don't know what the person on stage is thinking. And the people in your audience, they don't know what you're thinking either. I thought that was a small view, perhaps particular to me at the time with what I was doing and how I was singing things. But I think it's a true point. Rhythm is an important part, and how we address rhythm in our music can also have a very, very destabilizing or comforting effect. If it's a very highly syncopated passage and we're really on it rhythmically and we've got a lot of energy in the rhythm of the song, our audience will perceive that, they will feel that. So this is a question. This question is a very, very interesting thing and is worthy of like a live event in and of itself. But I want to get back to what's on screen here. How long should a vocal warm-up be if you plan on singing songs that day, so you don't run the risk of over-singing the warm-up? And on the other hand, how long should a vocal workout be? Interesting, Jake, 3048. 10 to 15 minutes, I would say, would be a reasonable vocal warm-up if you're going to be singing a bunch of different songs for the rest of the day. If you're doing a vocal warm-up workout, I would say it also depends on the ranges that you're working on in your state of development. So for someone new to transiting the secondo passaggio, 5 minutes, man. 5 minutes of high-range stuff, and that's probably enough. If you are well experienced in that and you're just staying sharp, then as much as you feel is necessary, but usually about a half an hour of just sort of light warm-ups, getting into the brunt of your practice there. Luke Warren, how do I keep my larynx neutral? Excellent question. That is largely a function of the muscles at the back, the tongue root, so back here. And it starts by working with it in the speaking range of your voice. So stick to below the secondo passaggio. As you start getting those vowels in alignment, then move into the zona di passaggio. You will benefit probably most by starting two things at once. Doing a little bit of vowel modification as you ascend towards the zona di passaggio, and starting some descending patterns from above the secondo passaggio and moving down. And what that will do is get you into the practice of keeping the larynx in a neutral position. Do some short vowel exercises in order to make that happen. Jake3048, how to cut back airflow so that you don't dry out the vocal cords when singing heavy, caused by the overuse of air. How much? Okay, breath support. So I would highly recommend you check out my Appaji breath management video. That's all it deals with, really. And that will show you the sort of body geography of how we engage with our voices for good. I don't use the word support, I say engagement. So that would be a starting place. Well, if you're singing really, really heavy, then you're not really using your vocal folds to their optimum, the most efficient and optimum way. So what I would suggest you do is make sure that you stay well hydrated before and try to stay hydrated during the performance. But a certain amount of that kind of effect when you're not using your voice optimally is somewhat to be expected, I'm afraid. When I was working, I would work with a lot of heavy metal singers in the San Francisco Bay Area. And what we would often talk about was that good vocal technique was going to make it so that their voices would stay healthier longer. But if they were going to engage in these really, really aggressive styles that were really just kind of slowing the clock down, that were not entirely going to abate the kind of fatigue and things like that that they were enduring. And it always did. Like we could get them to a point where the fatigue and like losing their voice was ceasing to happen. But that's a compromise, right? We have to make a compromise in order to have that. So if you're really going that heavy with your voice, then a certain amount of fatigue, irritation, dryness, unfortunately, I think is to be expected. But focusing on engagement can help that to abate to a certain degree. You can slow the clock down, staying hydrated. You can slow the clock down. That's at least a starting point. Jake3048, would you consider releasing your vocal warm-ups in audio form? I did some of them in audio form. There's a couple of them that are on like iTunes and Amazon, and there's a couple on the voicelessons.co.uk website. I think about it from time to time. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should do more of that. That's a totally reasonable request. And let me give that some thought. Harry Dunnett, hello. I've heard a lot about thinning your vocal cords when singing notes higher up in your range. What does thinning your vocal cords feel like, and how do you go about achieving this? Well, Harry, if you're just joining us, little disclosure here, I'm not feeling my best tonight, but I didn't want to miss this event. So unfortunately, I don't feel like I can really demonstrate that high register singing tonight. Let me see. I can at least show you there, which is just below my zona de passaggio. So it's not really high register singing, but it's close enough. So thinning. If we're making a good transition through the zona de passaggio, and that's the zona de passaggio is the area that's right at where our breaks are. So if you've heard of the term the vocal break, and I call that the secondo passaggio. That's what it's called in the Italian school of teaching. And as we approach that area of our voices, if we're too heavy on the thyroarytenoid dominant muscles, which is the chest voice, then it becomes very, very difficult to make a successful transition through the secondo passaggio. So, by thinning, what occurs when we're lighter on those initial notes prior to the zona de passaggio, then that is an opportunity for the cricothyroid muscles, which will engage somewhat, and they will elong the vocal fold. And I think that's what you're meaning by thinning. Because what happens is that the cricothyroid muscles engage, the vocal fold elongates, and so it thins slightly and stretches, and we're able to sing high notes using the main vocal fold rather than the ligament. The ligament is a falsetto tone production. So if I'm narrower here, that sets me up better to get into my zona di passaggio. And as I get to the secondo passaggio, because I'm allowing the cricothyroid muscles to elongate the vocal fold, I can sing through the break. And I'm actually surprised that's going as well as it does by the way my voice feels today. You can probably hear my transition a little better because my voice is a little bit under the weather. And normally you wouldn't hear that as much. So let me know if that's addressing the question that you're asking. Bikeman, thank you for the recommendations. At 59, I refuse to give up because it's a passion. Excellent. Please keep me posted on how that. Keep me posted. Let me know how it all turns out. I think that's awesome, and I wish you absolutely the best, and I hope that you keep singing. Gerald Ryan, it's okay after singing I drink cold water. My voice is still the same as. Yeah, man. Cold, like extreme. You know what? I had that question somewhere else too. Thank you for asking that again. If that's you, anyways, I don't know. I take all the names and stuff off. If you want to be anonymous, you can always write in. It shouldn't. I don't think that drinking cold water after you sing should have any impact. It's before you sing that's the issue. You want to avoid extreme temperature changes before you're singing in the time preceding an hour or so beforehand. How about tongue aerobics? Works for me. I haven't heard. I've done some tongue exercises before, but is that like a program? I've never heard of it. Let me see. What do we got here? Another person asked, is there a minimum amount you would recommend for days when the overall lesson time will be under an hour of practice? Yeah, I would say just to stay, like let's say you're not going to sing at all for the rest of your day. If you can warm up or sing, do some vocalizations for 10 to 15 minutes, I think you're going to be all right. I think this question was actually more about an overall voice session. However, so like if you're only going to sing for 45 minutes, less than an hour in any case, I still think, a 10-minute warm-up, if you can manage that, would be excellent. Use a mobile to take a picture of where your tongue is when you create a sound or vowel. An excellent idea. I often use my iPad for that sort of stuff. Like I'll kind of get that thing up there. Capone, I found that it is really important to imitate someone singing in the beginning. I tried Kurt Cobain and somehow, I get somewhere. Okay, be very cautious with imitating Kurt Cobain. He was a very, very aggressive singer. Oftentimes he would only be able to do 1 or 2 takes of songs in the studio before he was done on that tune for the day. So be careful with that. That being said, emotion-wise, like in his ability to emote is quite excellent. Capone, imitation is okay, absolutely. I think that imitation is great. So long as the difficulty there is trying to sound like the person. It's one thing to imitate Sinatra's phrasing. It's another thing to try to sound like Frank Sinatra. If you're trying to sound like someone, then you are almost certainly forcing your voice to do things that it might do of its own accord, and yet it might not. And that's a really tricky thing. One of the most difficult things about working on songs that are incredibly popular um, is trying to accept the idea that you're going to do your version, your it's going to sound your way, and the song may have been written specifically with the vocalist who made it famous, with their range and their vocal characteristics in mind. Putting all of their strong points right up front and glossing over all of the areas that they could use some improvement in. And if you're doing a cover song and you're imitating them, you don't have those benefits. So, imitate their vowel connectivity, imitate their phrasing, imitate how they may or may not do volume changes, dynamics. Particularly in Sinatra's case. Someone earlier asked about role models. Man, Sinatra is an amazing role model for phrasing. Listen to the way that he phrases things. It's incredible. He does what's called phrasing over the bar line. So we get these beautiful phrases, these beautiful long iterations of melody and lyrics that are broken in rather creative ways. So yeah. I mean, imitate those things. Imitate their artistry. But trying to sound like someone else, I would shy away from that if possible. Hello, Patricia. Hello from Argentina, and hello from England. Thank you so much. I'm sorry you couldn't make it earlier, but welcome. We're kind of wrapping things up here. But you know what? If I remember correctly, I think that you emailed me regarding another question, and I'm going to try and tackle that next week. So I hope that you can check that out. Bikemen. I learned online that visual clues can really help with breath support. Picture an elevator going up and down your chest when you inhale and exhale. Elevator is always... Yes, I think visual cues are excellent. I would add to that to be sensitive and creative. So if it's working for you, fantastic. If it's not working for you, try something else. Try a different visual cue. Try orienting your body in a different way. Try different things. Find what works best for you. Lawrence Wilson, what are good exercises in the gym for breath support? Excellent question. Thank you for asking that. We need to be flexible, and yet we also, a certain amount of muscle engagement is necessary. I think if your overall level of fitness is good, then I don't know that there's necessarily any reason to go crazy with a lot of muscle group exercises. However, certainly some work on the back could be a good thing, if for no other reason than to become more aware of how those muscles work and where they are and what they feel like. That would be, it's not so much the exercises in the gym that I think would be really, really advantageous. It would be generating more awareness of what those exercises, what those muscle groups feel like. So doing that thing where, your legs are kind of like, there's like a pad that goes by your hips, and your legs go out in the back and they keep you from falling forward, right? And then you take your upper body and you do that with it. That's going to really, really help you feel what those muscles back there feel like and how they work. Doing some exercises, it's like, they're called like backpacker push-ups or something like that, where you're sort of kneeling on one knee and you're lifting a dumbbell with your other arm, and you got your other arm on the ground. You can look up backpacker push-ups online and see what you find. But that's going to help make you become more aware of these oblique muscles and the intercostal muscles, and certainly maybe some crunches or some sit-ups or things like that for the rectus abdominis muscles. But again, it's more about becoming aware of how they work. It's not that we all need to hit the gym so that we can sing. I'm a very avid rock climber, And one person once said to me, the best weightlifting for rock climbing is to rock climb. And I think that a lot of times the best weightlifting for singing is singing. And so I would draw your attention to those exercises, and they're in the diaphragmatic warm-up that I have, where you sing he, 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 he. There's a short note, short breath, short note, short breath, and you sing a scale. Those can really, really help you to become aware of how you are engaging your suspension and how the solar plexus act on both the tonal onset and the inhalation, and work on the coordination between all of that and the vocal fold, to increase your dexterity with those big muscle groups and how they interact with the vocal fold. Pardon me. Let's see. Oh, have you heard or read, as I did in some papers, that the small displacement of the internal organs may be the common cause of acid reflux among singers with technique? I have not heard that. But I also might also say that when I address the tweak to the question that you had next week, there's more to say about that. Because displacement of the internal organs, I think in general we're doing too much of it. Capone, Jeff talks runners exercise. Yes, excellent. Sounds like. Have you done that before, Capone? Are you speaking from experience? Beginner question here. Where do I position my tongue while singing? Should it be lowered, or do I keep it relaxed naturally? Linus. Start with the tip of your tongue touching your front bottom teeth in the bottom of your mouth. The rear of your tongue needs to be free to raise and lower according to the vowel sound that you're singing. So it's going to move around a little bit. In the beginning, what you can try to do is notice the difference between an E vowel and A vowel. Notice where the tongue typically wants to be. And try to allow it to adopt those positions, while at the same time keeping those vowel sounds sounding the same in your thyroarytenoid dominant range. You may find that those vowels will shift quite a lot for you as you get started with that. Try to reconcile the differences as much as possible. There's a bunch of exercises in both the beginner playlist on my channel, and also if you pick one of the warm-ups that is not full range, then that will also stick to your thyroarytenoid dominant range. Yes, 30 plus in gym. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And you run half marathons. Fantastic. That's awesome. I want to thank you all for coming out and interacting. This is always such a good time, and I really, really enjoy having the opportunity to answer questions and just interact in real time with all of you. I do have to bid you a fond farewell this evening, and I've got a little bit of a backlog here, but this isn't too bad, so I'm going to get to the remainder of these next week. But thank you all so much. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing. I hope to see you again here, and I hope to see you elsewhere, out in the comment sections and on the channel. And thank you very much for your kind words. I really, really, really appreciate it. Have a great Saturday, if it's Saturday where you are. And I'll see you next time, okay? Bye.